As citizens of the United States of America, we all have rights. We have the right to express ourselves and the right to worship as we wish. We have the right to a fair trial and the freedom to vote in elections. We can run for an elective office, and we have all the right and opportunity to succeed in America. As citizens, we have responsibilities too. One of these responsibilities is to participate in our nation's democracy. To do that, we need to know and understand all we can about our great country. So let's get started. Have you ever thought about becoming President of the United States? You could live at the White House in Washington, D.C., drive around in a limousine, fly on a special jet, and travel around the world to meet other world leaders. In the United States, presidents are elected or chosen by its citizens. To understand how and why we elect a president the way we do, you have to know a little bit about our country's history and our government. So, let's start there. Let's go back in time to the 1760s, when the 13 original colonies that became the United States of America were ruled by England. Each colony was separate and independent, but the people in each colony had complaints about King George III and the government in England. Americans wanted more say in how they were governed, and the English wanted to keep control. This led to protests and eventually a war for independence, known as the American Revolution. After winning the war, representatives from the states came together to establish a new country called the United States of America. This is the Constitution of the United States. It's a document that says how our government works. The Constitution says that the power of our government is divided between three parts or branches. The legislative branch, called Congress, passes the laws. The judicial branch, headed by the Supreme Court, decides if the laws agree with the Constitution. And the executive branch makes sure that the laws are carried out. The president is the head of the executive branch. The president is also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. There's also a vice president who can take over if the president dies or is unable to hold office. Both the president and the vice president are elected to serve a 4-year term. There are only 3 qualifications for becoming president. The person has to be a natural-born citizen of the United States, at least 35 years of age, and must have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. You get to be president by winning an election. In an election, citizens get to elect or choose a person to represent them in government. Presidential elections take place in November. It's called the popular or general election, where registered voters can vote for the candidate they want for president. A candidate is a person who is trying to get elected, but the general election is not the official election that is required by the Constitution. To understand why, we have to go back to the early days of our country. At the Constitutional Convention in 1787, the delegates debated long and hard about how to elect the president. Some thought it should be up to Congress. Others thought it was a job for the states. Still others considered having the people elect the president directly. However, back then it was difficult for people to communicate and get information. Many leaders thought that most citizens wouldn't be informed enough to make a good decision. So in the end, the writers of the Constitution came up with a compromise. It's called the Electoral College. The word college, in this case, means a group of people who work together to vote. Each state gets a certain number of electors. The electors vote for president and vice president. The number of electors is equal to the number of representatives in Congress, and that is determined by the state's population, or the number of people who live in the state. It's easier to understand with an example. California has a very large population. It has 2 senators and 53 representatives in the House of Representatives. So California has 55 electoral votes. The state of Maine has a smaller population. It has 2 senators and 2 representatives in the House of Representatives, so Maine has 4 electoral votes. Today, in most states, the candidate for president who wins the popular or general election gets all the state's electoral votes. To be named president, the candidate has to get more than half of the votes of the Electoral College. Today, there are 538 electoral votes. There are 100 for the 100 senators, 435 for the members of the House of Representatives, and 3 from Washington, D.C. A majority means a candidate must get 270 electoral votes. If no candidate gets a majority, then the election has to be decided by Congress. But the candidate who gets the most popular votes isn't guaranteed to get the most electoral votes and become president. That's happened 4 times. The last time it happened was in the election of 2000. Candidate Al Gore won the popular vote, but George W. Bush's votes came from bigger states, so he won the Electoral College vote and became president. A political party is a group of people who work towards the same political goals. Throughout our nation's history, there have been many political parties. Since the 1850s, the 2 major political parties have been the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Each party has a symbol. The Republicans are represented by an elephant, the Democrats by a donkey. To be a candidate for president, a person has to get their party's nomination. Any person who says they want to be a candidate for president has to show how much support they have within their party. They do that by going to each state to find out. Some states, like Iowa, have a caucus. A caucus is a meeting where members of the same political party get together, in this case, to choose a presidential nominee. Many states have a primary. A primary is an election where people vote for who they want to receive the party's nomination. During the summer of the election year, each party holds its national convention. That's where the delegates from every state get together and select the party's presidential and vice presidential candidate. The 2 candidates together are called the party's ticket. Also, at each convention, the delegates vote on the party's policies and political views. This statement is called a platform. It's important for candidates to let people know who they are and what they think on important issues. They do that through a nationwide campaign. A campaign is when people act together to try to get a candidate elected. It's important for candidates to meet voters across the country. In the past, people didn't have television or radio, and it was difficult to travel from state to state. It was hard for candidates to get their message out to all of the people. When the railroads were built, it was possible for candidates to bring their campaigns to more people. These became known as whistle-stop campaigns. Today, candidates can reach voters through all kinds of media, including TV, radio, the internet, and social media. Airplanes allow candidates to travel and campaign in every state. Today, candidates debate or talk about the issues that are important to them. People can watch and learn about each candidate and decide whom they will vote for. All the campaigning leads to the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, when millions of Americans all across the country go to the polls and vote for President and Vice President of the United States. January 20th has been Inauguration Day since 1937. At exactly 12 noon, the President takes this oath or promise. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. What's it take to become President of the United States? If you are a natural-born citizen, if you're at least 35 years old and have lived in the United States at least 14 years, you're eligible to be president. Can you win a party's nomination? Can you get enough Electoral College votes? Just maybe you can, but it's up to the American people.